GrowCFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using GrowCFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today, growcfo.net.
Hello and welcome to the GrowCFO show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and this week I've got a new mentor in GrowCFO with me. I've got Warren Wise. Warren is based in the US and is a major figure in a fractional CFO firm, Liftbridge. So, Warren, welcome to the GrowCFO show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Warren, I've introduced you and said you're a fractional CFO, but now tell me something about you. How did you get to being that person?
Well, it's interesting. I'll admit, with respect to becoming a part of a fractional CFO firm, I was hesitant about it. And I've told our owners of the firm about that as well. So it's no surprise to them. It's something that in my career, I have enjoyed being a part of a single organization. And part of that, or much of that, probably goes back to one of the first companies I was with in my career, where I was there for 22 years and really grew up in that organization to a great extent, because I came in as a cost accounting clerk and ultimately became CFO of the organization as the company grew from just over 100 million in revenue to nearly 500 million in revenue during that time frame. But that was a part of me. I was in that organization. It was in me, so to speak. And I just really enjoyed that aspect and kind of growing up there. And so that created this desire within me to be with an organization for an extended period of time. Now, of course, the world has changed, business has changed. And so after COVID, there were so many people leaving one organization, staying for maybe a year, jumping to a new one, a lot of opportunities. During that stint or time frame, I was with an organization completely different, and I was there for about 4 or 5 years. But that gave me a taste of a little bit more longevity, that it was a good organization to be a part of for the longest time. And so that's what, again, that kind of reconnected that sense of being affiliated with one organization and really tied to it and having a good relationship with it. And so the thought of becoming a fractional CFO was like, oh my goodness, I won't be tied to any one real organization. Yes, I'll be a part of Liftbridge, and there's that continuity there, which is good. But having all of these other entities that I play various roles within, I thought I might be missing out on something there that might be working against the positive image I had in my mind of being tied into one organization. But it's been quite good. I would say that there's been a good amount of flexibility around that. It's also given me exposure to a lot of companies that I would not have ordinarily been affiliated with in my past. And so just whether it's the subject matter in products that are being produced by those entities, those companies, or what, there's been a lot of benefit that has really countered or outweighed that loss of being tied to one organization and only thinking about one organization for a long period of time.
Yeah, so 22 years with one organization, that must have given you some deep experience in a very specific industry. Tell me more about that.
It really did. And so started out in this cost accounting clerk role, and that very detailed level of transactional information, whether it be, I would go out on a production floor. So this was a manufacturing company that was extremely capital intensive. And so it's not an industry that anyone can get into very easily. I mean, when they built a new factory, it was over $100 million investment. And so it was that type of an environment. And getting in there and just being at a very detailed level and then kind of expanding from there, I went from becoming the cost accounting clerk to a cost accountant, a senior cost accountant, and then I became the corporate controller after that. Then I became a director of financial analysis, which meant having responsibility for the cost accounting group, as well as all risk management, as well as all the treasury functions. So having that responsibility, then I got involved with tax and credit to a limited extent and then became CFO after that. So that each of those roles may have lasted anywhere from a year to 4 or 5 years, but that's kind of how that 22 years increased. And so that was one of the good things, how that 22 years played out, I should say. And that was one of the good things, though, is that I wasn't limited to only dealing with financial matters, but also I ended up getting some responsibility over HR or purchasing or benefits. So I was drawn into multiple areas. And so it was a good organization. It was well run. The owners of the organization also had a long-term view. So profitability from one year to the next, it wasn't like we had to send money back to Europe where the owners were on a regular basis. That money was retained within the organization and used for future expansion. And so getting all of that exposure was really I just value that to such an extent. And it just really helped shape who I am and how I view things. Not publicly held, and publicly held companies are not a part of my past. So that's something that I didn't get to enjoy or experience during my career that was ongoing. But privately held is where I've spent all of my time in my past, I would say, and this was no exception. The exception to this was the owners were a billion-dollar organization, extremely large worldwide company. So we had our entity here in the United States that I was a part of, and we were pretty autonomous for the longest time. And then we started doing more and more with Europe and the home organization around the world. And so whether it was those items that I've mentioned, but also interacting with the European teams, started a new entity in Australia. So getting that exposure as well. I led the acquisition of a Canadian company. I looked at a second Canadian company that we considered buying that was a part of that group, a team evaluating that process. So I am just, like I said, I'm very thankful for the exposure that I've had and everything that I was able to get out of that experience with that company.
That is some really super exposure there, Warren. And firstly, you're ticking that box of doing things outside of finance. That's something that a lot of CFOs struggle with. Oh, become CFO. I'm not head of finance anymore. Oh, and I've got to look after the procurement department. I've got to look after the HR department. In some cases, I've got to look after the IT department. How do I do this stuff? So the fact that you've got experience at doing those is absolutely great for anybody coming along wanting to find some help in those areas.
I'll mention this as well. It also gave me exposure to commodities and hedging commodities, coming up with a hedge plan and such. So whether it was precious metal or electricity in California or natural gas hedging, the family also owned additional businesses. And so I was directly involved in a business. It was a farm, agricultural entity over in a neighboring state that had in total approximately 10,000 acres. And so hedging soybeans or corn or wheat, those commodities as well. I love that aspect and did a fair amount of foreign currency, of course, as you would imagine, with a European company. And we would get our debt arranged typically by the European entity. And so if we needed to draw on a credit line or something, that may have been through Deutsche Bank or one of the other international banks or European banks. So anyway, I just say that because those were aspects that I really enjoyed, and it was just new and different but fun.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, like you, Warren, a lot of my early experience was in big manufacturing, actually in the chemical industry. You don't build small chemical plants. In fact, the business that I worked for ended getting sold off was that we weren't big enough. We had to join forces. We had to become a bigger, particularly production force in the market because the economies of scale. So those barriers to entry, those huge businesses, but it taught me a lot about business partnering. A lot of people involved around the business. You're the guy with the numbers. How do you share those numbers with the rest of the business? Make them take notice, make them actually understand. And I imagine you as well would have those numbers that you were talking about look more like telephone numbers.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very true.
Now, I completely get that. And I love it that you went all the way through and became CFO in that organization. So, Warren, tell me a little bit about your experience of why is the CFO role kind of different to the head of finance role? You in particular, what did you struggle with when you became CFO? What was different?
I would say for me, admittedly, this was something that was voiced to me and I was aware of as well. But as you get considered for a role like CFO, there are the pros and the cons to making a change like this. My natural tendency was to operate at such a detailed level and be so familiar with various details and specific numbers, whatever it was. The question was, can he really transition to a CFO and rely on staff more so than what he ever has? So I had gotten a comfortable standpoint or a comfortable stage of relying on staff. But I would say even more so rising to this level and interacting with other department heads and this and that. And so I learned to make that change. And admittedly, there were different times when I struggled to various degrees. But at the same time, I really kind of grabbed onto that and enjoyed that aspect of it and being able to, I would always be familiar with the details and not every single detail because I had information provided to me, but I became comfortable operating at that level. And so relying on the information provided to me, and I had already reviewed it. And so I was comfortable with it and I had already asked my questions, but then presenting that or discussing that information with others. There was a transition phase, but I believe that I transitioned pretty well in that.
So, Warren, I'm a new CFO. I'm going through that transition phase and I'm reaching out to you for help. What sort of advice would you be giving me?
I mean, one thought that I have immediately would be whether or not you have the staff to support you, the staff that you trust, you are content with their performance, that they consistently give you good information. I would say that's a big piece because in a lot of ways, a person, a CFO, may be only as good as the staff that's supporting them because of the volume of data that you may have at your fingertips. A CFO can't grasp all of that and know every single detail about it. And so you got to have those people below you, working with you, partnering with you, supporting you, who can provide those answers.
I guess it's a mindset thing as well, Warren. If that person's anything like me, and I've got a natural tendency to do it myself.
Yes.
Somebody else to do it. Now,
right.
Part of the transition into that CFO role is having to trust somebody else to do it. So
it is.
A lot of it is about just going through that mindset change and getting the other people to do it. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And I know I've had these discussions with others at different points in time where a CFO may have someone providing her with information as an example, but yet she's not comfortable. She's not 100% sold on the validity of the information that's been provided to her. And so she needs to take the time to show that person or something in their training to make sure that they know how to go about getting that information and providing all aspects, relevant aspects to her, but yet doesn't want to take the time to do that, doesn't feel like she has the time to educate, so to speak. So it's just shorter and quicker at this moment if I just go and pull the information myself, and it can be an ongoing struggle. And
it really is an interesting conflict. And one of the things that new CFOs have told us, we've got inside GrowCFO the top 10 issues that new CFOs come up with. And sitting in the top 3, one of the top 3 is a task overwhelm.
yes,
It's pretty much what you're saying there. I need
that's right.
need somebody else to help me do it because I haven't got time to do it myself. But at the same time, I haven't got time to tell them how to do what I need them to do. And I'm stuck.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What about, as you took that new role, did imposter syndrome ever hit in?
Yes, I would say so. And I would say that confidence played into it to a great extent as well. And just trying to, I'll say this, when I started out my career there, I honestly did not, I knew I was good at different tasks or whatever it may be, and I'm good with relating to people and empathetic and such. But I didn't necessarily have the confidence to say or think I'm going to operate at that CFO role. I came into the department of, say, 15 people at headquarters, 15 to 18 people maybe. If I would have been asked, I would have said, well, I can get to this level, but not necessarily the CFO level, just because I didn't have the experience to see how my skill set, my knowledge, what I could learn would really fit well in going to a role like that. But it was our CFO himself he was somebody who could really help instill confidence in a person and really help me to believe in myself. And so getting to that level, there were still the questions, should I really even be at this role or whatever? And so a person may always battle with that confidence or lack thereof. I was just lucky that I had somebody, that gentleman actually went from being the CFO to the president, CEO of the company. So I continued to have a good relationship with him. And there were other things that came into play later. But my biggest challenge was confidence, I would say. And you hear people say, well, you fake it till you make it, or nobody at that level really knows what they're doing or at a particular level, but you get there, you just continue pushing forward. And so it came about and things played out well, and I'm happy for it and better off because of it.
Yeah, brilliant. Because I talked about those top 10 challenges for the new CFO. And I talked about number 3 on the list being task overwhelm. You know what number 2 and number 1 are?
Related to confidence.
Number 2 is lack of confidence. Number 1 is imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So, Warren, you are so ideally placed with that experience now to take a new CFO through all of that doubt and uncertainty and task overwhelm and so on, and say, hey, I've been there. I know what you're going through. I've got the T-shirt. Come on, we can work through this.
Yeah, and I would say that's really a big driver in me wanting to get involved in something like this, because with the fractional CFO work that I do, I'm fortunate that I've got some flexibility and that it's not like I'm working a job that consumes 50 or 60 hours a week. I'm able to limit my time, how much time I put into the fractional role, and do things with family now, and truly enjoy work-life balance that I've talked to others about forever and didn't really.
Yep.
And so anyway, all of that to say that I now have more freedom and availability to do something. And I thought, you know what, there's no reason why I shouldn't just try to, if there's someone out there who could benefit, then by all means, I'll be glad to help them out and try to support them in that and try to fill them with some confidence.
I know one of the reasons that we record podcasts with all the mentors we work with is so that that person looking for help, looking for support, can listen to this and say, oh, I can see a whole list of mentors here. Which one do I choose? Because there's got to be a chemistry. There really has to be a chemistry between mentor and mentee. So before you even get on a call with the prospective new mentee, they kind of listen to a podcast or maybe seen a workshop that you've taken part in and have a real feel for you and knowing, does this feel like the person I can work with? Yeah.
That makes sense.
Makes so much sense. And now I think an awful lot of this, Warren, is chemistry. Relatable experience as much as anything. I've been through it and you've got the T-shirt. And think back to that experience as well. You talked about getting involved in acquisitions. Tell me a little bit about that, because that feels as though it might be something else that took you out of your comfort zone.
Definitely so. What was interesting about that, so that one in particular, there was a manufacturing company in Canada that they had their own sales team, of course, and so on and so forth. Their manufacturing process was quite antiquated, and the process that we as an organization had was far superior, and truly not just being arrogant, but there were chemical aspects or material aspects, I should say, that prove that out. But getting involved with that and negotiating with their point person, and what ended up happening was ended up doing a supply agreement with their organization for them to produce a certain amount of material to kind of stock up inventory but their manufacturing process was not a part of what we were acquiring, rather than all of their support staff, sales team. And so it essentially became a sales organization. But I negotiated on the material that was being acquired, negotiated on their facilities. I had to meet individually with all of their staff. They had probably 25 people. So the staff didn't know anything about it. So went to a closing in Canada, signed the deal, and then I went to their facility and I was introduced as, okay, this is so-and-so Warren from the US and his company you're very familiar with. They have now acquired our business. And so those employees were shocked, of course. And I think maybe some of them knew that there could be something like this could happen at some point in time, but they had no idea that it was that day or that year even. But I met with each person individually, retained 100% of the staff. So, there wasn't a rush for the door. Everybody's running for the exits to leave and chaos ensued. Nothing like that. It was a calm, they were nervous. They wanted to hear what I had to say, but calm interactions, a lot of good discussion, answering questions. I try to be as open as possible. There are those subjects you can't get into at times, but for the most part, just very open and forthright with information, had well prepared for that. And we took over that business. And so they became the Canadian representative for a similar product line that we started producing, utilizing their name. And so we had two essential product lines, I would say, but definitely changed the manufacturing process for that. So anyway, all of that to say, it wasn't a $100 million acquisition, but it was a great acquisition to start with. Yeah. And so the evaluation of the financials and what makes sense and, what duplication can we eliminate, and this consumes some of our available capacity that is underutilized at the moment. And so I had a lot of meetings internally with our staff, with our operations group and everybody, just to make sure this made sense, of course. We worked through a lot of that. And right as that concluded, there was a separate manufacturing company in Canada that was for sale. And that was a much more formalized process. They had a broker representing them, a bank. And so went with a team then on that particular deal to evaluate that. And we ended up making an offer, but we didn't finalize that acquisition at all. We stopped because another party was involved. A competitor of ours in the States was involved, and they bought that company about a 25% premium beyond what to pay. And that didn't play out very well for them. So I think we made the right choice in not pursuing that one. But that was a great exposure as well, just because of the formality of it all and utilizing various methods to value that business, whether discounted cash flow analysis or whatever it may be. That played into our analysis. And so just getting that exposure and analysis and review is something that I really enjoyed seeing and being a part of those discussions as well.
Those skills of one being able to do the discounted cash flow analysis and understand what the business was worth. But I think the real skill that you've got to have is how do you explain that to the non-financial folk in the business?
Right. I would say you're definitely right on that. So those experiences, that's limited, a couple, 2 or 3 areas, exposure there, specific examples with the manufacturing company. But then that played into other roles that I ended up taking on. I became CFO of a staffing company, about $100 million staffing company, roughly, and made an acquisition there. I led that acquisition of another staffing company in another part of the U.S. So that was new experience in that it certainly wasn't manufacturing or assets. There was just the staffing business. And then I left there and became president and CFO of another smaller staffing company. And we were selling our business to a broker and working with potential suitor, a private equity company that was looking to buy us. And so I was involved in all the due diligence and gathering and providing answers and meeting as president and CFO a lot of these different individuals. So that was additional valuable experience. So still not in my career. It's not like I've done 10 or 20 deals, but I've had 5 deals that I've had a very detailed and good depth in that.
That is just fantastic experience to have under your belt. So moving from manufacturing into a completely different industry, what sort of challenges did that bring to you?
It was different for a variety of reasons. And actually, I had a stint with a higher ed company as well, a higher ed support organization, I would say. It was a not-for-profit, but they had involvement with a lot of overseas operations, and roughly 2/3 of their U.S. budget was denominated in foreign currency. And so had that experience as well. But getting into staffing, the staffing company I joined needed someone who could provide a more detailed level of financial analysis, profitability, and looking at branch profitability, but also types of really kind of like product line profitability with different types of staffing, meaning light industrial staffing in a warehouse to more technical staffing of IT staffing, that type of thing. But also had that experience in doing an acquisition as well because they wanted to grow their business. So all of that fit nicely, just different sets of numbers, smaller numbers in certain cases. But it was definitely different from going from a company that may have $750 million or $1 billion worth of assets to a staffing company that really the only asset is its accounts receivable for the most part, by and large. So that was different in monitoring accounts receivable and such, but had always done that anyway. It was just, in a way, it was a more narrow focus because of the complexity of the business was very different and not complex really whatsoever. You had just a few cost drivers. You had your temporary staff that you were paying and any payroll taxes and markup and things associated with those staff members, but that was your product, is the way I looked at it, not to minimize the value of an individual. But at the end of the day, as a company, that's what you're providing. You're providing a service or an individual, a product to another entity that is leasing basically that product from you. And so that was quite different, but I kind of missed the challenge of the more complex environment. At the same time, I enjoyed bringing a more detailed analytical view to those businesses, those staffing businesses that hadn't been there previously, and really shed some light on profitability and different, whether it was geographic or by type of staffing or whatever it was. So a level of detailed analysis that had not existed in those businesses previously.
Yeah. So as you moved then into being a fractional CFO with LiftBridge, did that start then exposing you to other businesses in other industries?
Yes, I would say so. So one, my first client is essentially a manufacturing company, but it's a completely different product line and a different type of manufacturing. Like the main one that I was with, the 22-year experience, that was like a continuous flow type of manufacturing. You turned on the oven and everything, and the material started flowing, and it was nonstop unless there was a jam or you were taking it down, that product line down, that machine down for a 30-day rebuild. And that occurred every, say, 5 years roughly. With the more recent, this other manufacturing company that I'm now providing services for, it's been very interesting. It's more sheet metal related. It's more of a job shop rather than a continuous flow atmosphere environment. So just the costing, the lean manufacturing viewpoints, all of that is quite different. So it's provided learning opportunity for me as well, but also bringing in, what I know and combining that with what already exists in an organization, a different type of organization, to kind of try to develop something new and some new ways to view cost or look at things, and getting into contribution margin or whatever it may be that may not have been there previously. So it's given me that exposure. I do work with a company that imports flooring, so I do some work there. I do some work with another company that's a franchise that's installing lift chairs, like an elderly person who may have stairs at home and they're having trouble getting up and down the stairs. They get a lift chair to help them go up and down. So that was something I'd never had any exposure to, or the franchise model. So there's a lot of variety and exposure to those other areas, and I'm sure I'll continue to have that going forward.
Which is brilliant. You bring a wealth of experience out of your full-time roles into those smaller companies that can't afford a CFO. And in return, you're picking up so much new learning about how these other business models work. I think that's a fantastic combination. And certainly as as I move on through life, I know that I'm a natural learner. I love having those learning experiences put in front of me to about something new. I can sense the same in you.
Yes, you're exactly right. And that's one thing that I really like about this is that, while going back to my past and talking about that and that desire that I had for kind of being tied into one company, at the same time, there is something refreshing about being involved with different companies and learning something new, to your point, but getting the exposure to all of that I wouldn't have gotten just by remaining with one company. So not only are you learning something new, but I think variety is good. It's helpful to have variety, and it keeps things more interesting at times. So
Warren, earlier in the conversation, you touched on work-life balance, and you said you think you're starting to get that right in the fractional role. So tell me a little bit about the Warren who's not at work. What do you get up to?
I would say one thing that I'm starting to enjoy is, there are a variety of things, but there is an aspect to it of some flexibility around travel. I've been able to do more traveling that's not work related now than what I used to do. And it's funny, my wife gives me a hard time because I've mentioned that, I went to Australia for 4 days or something like that, and in this new entity when I was at the manufacturing company. And she's like, why didn't you take a week of vacation with that and see the country, experience the country and all of that? And it was like, well, I had to get back. I had work to do here. And so
that sounds like the first time I came across the USA. And I came across because this was in the days of the chemical industry, and we acquired a manufacturing plant in North Carolina, a little beautiful part of the country. And I went out on Monday morning. I was back in the UK on Friday night, and my job was to go out and work out how on earth do we get this plant in the US to report its results back so we can consolidate it into the UK business or the European business. What did I see? I saw the inside of an aeroplane. I saw the inside of a hotel room. I saw the inside of an office block, and I walked around a manufacturing plant that looked very similar to the manufacturing plant that we had back in the UK. What did I say of the USA? Very little.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So now, as an example, my wife is traveling here in a couple of weeks. She has a business trip to Europe, but I'm going with her, and I'm going to get to see a part of Europe that I've never been to before. And so that I do plan to do some work remotely from there. And so that's kind of a nice flexible feature of the fractional role that I enjoy as well. But that's something new that in the past I wouldn't have been able to take advantage of that opportunity, I would say, or wouldn't have felt like I could really tear myself away from my existing day-to-day job to go make a trip like that. But now I do work from home a couple of days a week. I'm physically at one of my clients 2 days a week. I do more around the house, I would say, to help my wife out because she works remotely from home almost exclusively. So there's interacting more with her and helping out more, I would say, here at home, running my kids to a dentist appointment or something like that I wasn't able to do previously. So some of that may not sound fun to anyone, but it's just something that it's a more fulfilling involvement, I would say, with the family than what I may have enjoyed previously.
Yeah, and those are important things. I know in a lot of the years after I left the chemical industry and became a management consultant, I ended up spending a lot of time on projects working away from home. And it's lovely now to be able to work remotely. As GrowCFO, 100% remote organization, which means you've got some time flexibility. As long as the job gets done, does it whether you did it at 9 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock at night? No, not at all.
That's right. A few weeks ago, about a month ago or so, to Florida. And so I was at the swimming pool and beach, but I had my laptop. And not that I spent all day working, but that was a nice environment to get some work done, get caught up on a couple of things. So
absolutely. So, Warren, I have absolutely enjoyed chatting to you today. Now, if anybody's listening in to this podcast and saying, I want a mentor, well, I think Warren could be a really good mentor if you want somebody who's got all of that experience. And there's a lot of it there. So, Warren Wise, thank you for being this week's guest on the GrowCFO show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. It's been enjoyable for me as well.